Well, my goodness gracious, let me tell you the news. My head's been wet with the midnight dew. I've been down on bended knee, talking to the man from Galilee. He spoke to me with a voice so sweet, I thought I heard the shuffle of angels sweet. He called my name and my heart stood still when he said, John, go do my will. Go tell that long-tongued liar, go and tell that midnight rider, tell the rambler, the gambler, the backbiter, tell him that God's gonna cut him down. Tell him that God's gonna cut him down. You can run on for a long time, run on for a long time, run on for a long time. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down. Sooner or later, gotta cut you down.
Ubisoft started a plethora of new IPs on the current generation of consoles, from the misleading Watch Dogs that kicked off the PS4 life cycle and had people barking mad at its vertical slice, to the snowy downhill simulator and the frosty form of Steep. If you could think of a genre for the next generation consoles at the time, chances are Ubisoft had a new IP for it. The only problem with starting so many new IPs every single year, which isn't hypothetical, was the fact that their existing franchises suffered. Rainbow Six got introduced, scrapped, had the team fired, moved to different studios before coming back with a tight multiplayer tactical shooter which still misled the public with its vertical slice unveiling at E3, before being circumvented and achieving critical acclaim years later. Like a phoenix that didn't hear the fire alarm go off, following suit and stepping away from its roots was another Ubisoft brand, Ghost Recon, which went from a squad-based infiltration game with stealth elements to Just Cause with passive AIs, whose intelligence can be found at the bottom of most piles of horse excrement. And then there's Ubisoft's two biggest franchises, Assassin's Creed and Far Cry, with one telling me to go to the mountains every single time I boot up the game like a hermit suffering with dementia, and the other having a god complex. Which one preaches to the choir and really nails what Ubisoft is today? Well, I can tell you, it certainly isn't Assassin's Creed. Okay, quick little rant time here, so a little game to play. Try to guess where the comedy starts and the nervous breakdowns end. Starting now. A franchise that becomes the soap opera of video games. Every once in a while they bring out a compelling villain or a good character arc and then follow it up with weeks of crap. They have milked the franchise so dry that the cow is now lactose free. It's a game without reward, given that after every single quest you complete, you get a feeling of dissatisfaction. Every quest ends with, "You're allowed this much XP," like an overprotective parent keeping their fat child on a leash so they don't OD on the cookie dough. It becomes banal and derivative after realising that your accomplishments mean fuck all. "Oh goody, yes, unlocked a legendary outfit, it doesn't do anything different than the starter gear." Unlike any other game on the marketplace, intrinsically speaking, you unlock a legendary outfit in Horizon Zero Dawn and it will grant you an XP boost with invulnerability for playing the game so long you think the Mesozoic machines are real. However, if you ever bought a car through Gumtree, there might as well be. A game that takes a legendary status even further is A Legend of Zelda, in which acquiring new articles of clothing yields major rewards. You can become invincible to fire and other elements. In Assassin's Creed, you spend ages killing the Wild Hunt rejects around Egypt, and your reward is a piece of shit that still gets you killed quicker than a dolphin with hydrophobia. Anyways, after roaming around Assassin's Creed Origins, or as it's formerly known as Carry Creed, from the amount of times you need to pick up some stupid NPC every single quest, look, all I'm saying is I'm all for sitting on my arse for hours on end, because that's pretty much half of a YouTuber's job, with the other half dedicated to looking like a used sex doll in your thumbnails, but these Latin layabouts make being unemployed look like you're gearing up for the Olympics. Well, I guess wearing a tracksuit 24/7 and running away from sirens is kinda halfway there. So after 62 hours of playtime, I reached the finale, with a lackluster conclusion in which you're told a chopper is coming, but to no avail. It feels more like a South Park parody of Game of Thrones than an ending to a never-ending stabby story, or like when my dad said he would return from the shops 26 years ago. To have a point to this story rant, I guess I was in denial that Ubisoft could make a wonderful cinematic masterpiece again like they used to in the games of yesteryear. Now it seems all they do is stick a name synonymous with their brand on the box and push it out to the masses, cherry picking the best parts from other games in a hope to achieve the exact same success, like becoming a drug dealer after you're told it worked out so well for Walter White. Unless, of course, that brand is Far Cry. Told you there's a point to this. Creative director Dan Hay and his team at Ubisoft Montreal keeps that franchise closer to them than a hostage in a terrorist negotiation. So for the first time ever in my life, I thought I'd do some research and explore every bit about this game before even pressing the start button. And now that I have, the start button has become harder than being a guide dog with human allergies and a terrible eyesight. So let's explore, learn and go through 5 months with Far Cry 5. Far Cry is a series that started with a small team of 116 developers working at Crytek in collaboration with Ubisoft. The series was meant to be a AAA version of a tech demo that Crytek showcased called Exile Dinosaur Island. The team decided to go with a different idea, setting the game on a tropical island as a precursor to Crytek's better known brand Crysis, which also started its venture the same year with a partnership deal with EA, and would subsequently release to computer fires everywhere in 2007. The Crysis series would become more stressful to work on down the line, with the finale in the franchise, Crysis 3, having a team of only 100 people working on it over a 23-month development cycle. But back to Far Cry, the game was written by Richard Dansky, who would later stay with publisher Ubisoft to pen the scripts for The Division, For Honor and Splinter Cell Blacklist. The director of this game would work on the feature film of everyone's favourite German filmmaker, Uwe Boll, but more on those two later. The concept of a Far Cry Dinosaur Island would not be scrapped entirely, but instead reworked when Ubisoft put its bombastic hats on and created the surreal satirical outings of Blood Dragon, with huge reptilian creatures that have more neon lights than a brothel in Amsterdam. It would become a welcome change to the tropical torture we explored in the past, and spearhead the direction in which Far Cry 5 Season Pass would take. But that was a previous adventure, so let's break down the big names behind this new outing in the series to see if Far Cry 5 can convert us into believers. Believers? Maybe? Beyond good and believers? Screw it, I'm having that one. First of the faithful is Kim Herden, who acts as the vocal director for this entry in the series, and when you see someone's achievements on their IMDb listed as Director of Bibleman and The Magic School Bus Rides Again, it fills you about as much confidence as going skydiving with someone who is afraid of heights. However, she did start off with a small little feature called The Seventh Dwarf, which was a short-lived fantasy 3D animated adventure, which really puts the word fable in the word forgettable. With the religious streak this person is on, now seems like the perfect time to pitch my spin-off idea, Saint Alvin and the Chipmunks. I know what you're thinking, Jesus help us, but please I implore you, ask Bibleman to do it instead.
Jesus loves you all.
Next up to the altar is Andrew Gordon McPherson, otherwise known as the main composer of the soundtrack. So if you like the John Williams booming orchestral scores of the TV show It's Supper Time, then you're in luck, because all devices come with a mute button. Failing to find that, every game has a sound option menu for just this occasion. Of course, the game also has 10 original hymns recorded by the talented Dan Romer and performed angelically by the Bobby Shin National Choir. But given the last time I was in a church that was still made out of straws and bricks, I couldn't tell you which real hymns they are based off. However, I can tell you the floor seems to share similarities with O Happy Day and Jerusalem. Joining Andrew in the sound department is Julian Beeston, who worked on some game called Wolfenstein The New Order and some superhero movie called Deadpool with that guy you know from awful movies in it. But What I think tops both of these people in the sound department is Nadine Wheaton, who was the musical coordinator for Civilization 6, but also composed the soundtrack for the movie Show Dogs. Hype overload. I mean, they say never work with animals, which probably explains why you don't see Gary Busey in Hollywood anymore, but hell, screw that. Show Dogs, 10 out of 10, give a dog a boner. That is a movie that exists in our world and will probably be a video on the channel I Hate Everything in the foreseeable future, in a heavily condensed form of course. As of writing this part, Show Dogs received a hard edit cut after the NCSE, formerly known as the National Centre on Sexual Exploitation, linked scenes of a dog being touched to the serious case of child abuse and adolescent pornography. I know I can be sarcastic, however this stupidity actually happened. It seemed a pseudo remake of K9 is not saved from the belligerent scrutiny, even though these dog jokes have formed the centrepiece in slapstick comedy for decades. The critics deemed the jokes and scenes not politically correct in this modern age, but no one complained about Will Arnett sniffing his dog's undercarriage. Shortly after the development wrapped, Will was arrested for checking out his dog's nut job. Maybe I'm just being hyperbolic to the response this received, but I grew up in the 90s, man. A time in which Robin Williams dressed in drag and made sexual advances towards Pierce Brosnan, which surprisingly isn't the most embarrassing thing Pierce Brosnan has been subjugated to. He also tried to sing in Mamma Mia, and dear God, here we go again.
Thank God that I don't have some middle-aged menopausal man telling me how to run my life. You know, I'm free and I'm single. And it's great.
Where are those happy days? They seem so hard to find.
I tried to reach for you, but you have closed your mind. Whatever happened to our love? I wish I understood. It used to be so nice, it used to be so good.
This is what happens in the modern age when you close the asylums and give the inmates a platform to preach. You end up with broken films and a lack of continuity. This is unfortunately a growing trend in Hollywood today. Squandered opportunities as to not to offend the faint-hearted. 9 Lives went from a hard R-rated comedy in the style of a Woody Allen flick to a family film with a star that likes families a bit too much. So in the end of the day, it did have something in common with Woody Allen. Solo, a Star Wars story, decided to ditch the creative fingers of Philip Lord and his writing partner Miller in the last-ditch attempt to appeal to the wider spectrum, which has left them in a dark room with their pants down going Han Solo, which is why games like Far Cry 5 shouldn't just be pushed aside based on nothing but their narrative complexity and instead studied. Which brings me to the last name on this list, and someone I had the honour to actually get in contact with. Drew Holmes, the writer of Bioshock Infinite, is penning the script for Far Cry 5, which already seemed like a far cry from the original series, but that did pique my interest. This guy has talent and writes diverse scripts, from Red Faction Guerrilla to Saints Row 2, which still remains the best in the series. Finally, Bioshock Infinite, which people claimed Far Cry 5 was ripping off when it was first shown to the public at E3, which is completely ludicrous. Infinite is a game about an overzealous religious cult that prepares for the end of the world as you take control as a detective venturing into an uncharted land to rescue a girl, all the while being tormented by a complex and charismatic villain. While on the other hand, Far Cry 5 is about an overzealous cult that is preparing for the end of days as you take control as a deputy sheriff venturing into an uncharted land, all the while being tormented by a charismatic and compelling villain. So already they are the difference between heaven and earth. Speaking of Bioshock Infinite though, Far Cry 5 shares more than its controversy and cult status with the popular shooter, as in the credits for Infinite, Ubisoft Montreal is thanked. And after doing some digging, I found out a lot of the developers that worked on Infinite now works at Ubisoft on Far Cry 5. Paul Green, a level designer at Ubisoft, helped create the Frinkton map in Bioshock Infinite. But I kid with Drew Holmes. The guy comes across as a nice dude and was kind enough to answer a few questions I had about Far Cry 5. I asked about the writing process behind this game. After finishing up the work on the excellent hydrophobic hijinks at Burial at Sea, how hard was it getting into the open world mindset again and writing a game that is open-ended with systematic elements and multiple antagonists? I also asked the question about day one on the team, pondering whether Montana was always the first choice, and here is the response I got.
Starting all games is difficult, regardless of what you did before. Lots of new tools and people involved. Luckily we had a great team, and the game was always planned to be in Montana.
Interestingly, the Montana confirmation is something new for the Far Cry brand, as Far Cry 3's initial concept was an amusement park with a muscle-bound villain that looked more Bane than Voz. Not to mention the fact the story would have tied together the plots of the previous Far Cry titles instead of unravelling your own cerebral cortex. And the same can be said for Far Cry 4, in which the original concept was a direct sequel to Far Cry 3. The only thing that changed in the development cycle of Far Cry 5 was finding the villain, Joseph Seed. But still, back to Far Cry 5, which if you're a long-term fan of this brand, the newest game in the franchise, may feel like you're playing the blended amalgamation of the entire series. There's the team aspects from Far Cry 2, now dubbed the buddy system.
I'm not your buddy, friend. He's not your friend, guy.
Then there's the Fangs for Hire system that was touched on in the Shangri-La sections of Far Cry 4 and expanded on in the follow-up title Far Cry Primal. Then there's a villain inciting wisdom to your face like every other game in this franchise. Couple that with the freedom of the original Far Cry, mixed with the supernatural elements of the first game in the form of crazed animal hunts, like Evil Dead, Pet Detective. The cult has been experimenting on all the animals in the county, and given that these are hillbillies, I'm not surprised, because like I have always said, what's a hillbilly's favourite loaf of bread? Inbred. Granted, the deliverance of that joke could have been better, but still. I couldn't find any statistics on how much it costs to make Far Cry 5, but going off the subject matter and our main antagonist, I can see they already made a profit. Okay, I'll admit that joke was terrible, but you know what you can do. However, I can say that after the initial launch week, Ubisoft gave out the statistics on how much the game made back. Far Cry 5 has been the most successful product in the franchise, and in its first week alone, made bank of over $310 million. After production of Far Cry 4 wrapped on Karat and our hero remembered Coco and the other souls have been taken along the way, a survey was nonchalantly passed out to players asking participants which location the next Far Cry should be set in and how engaged they were in seeing a full-scale Far Cry experience taking place in a more outlandish setting. Unbeknownst to the fan base, this was our first look at Far Cry 5 Season Pass. A Far Cry game set in a futuristic sci-fi setting on another planet was the first of many options which would quickly be turned into the base for the DLC Lost on Mars. Another option asked players whether a Far Cry game set during the zombie apocalypse sounded appealing, and surely enough this was used as the fundamentals for the DLC Dead Living Zombies. And finally, another popular choice among those who voted was a Far Cry game set in the Vietnam War during the 1960s, and this quickly became known as the DLC aptly named Hours of Darkness. But the DLC isn't the only interesting insight into Far Cry 5, as this is actually the first game in the series to be accurately mapped and modelled using the Houdini engine, which was formerly used in Ghost Recon Wildlands to create a more procedural world, freeing up man hours on game development. The team also used photogeometry early on in the game's development. Look at me sounding a lot like Digital Foundry over here. The team at Ubisoft Montreal set out on a trip to Montana with specialist cameras costing $8,000 each and used the aforementioned technique to completely map the entirety of the landscape. This means a tree in Far Cry 5 is actually a real tree, and in one case while mapping the forest region of Montana, the team came across a tree with a love heart etched onto it, and liked it so much they put it in the game. Now that's a sweet side of trees, but I can probably guess there'll be a fair share of carved dicks and love you forever signs scrawled into the bark like a cat falling down curtains. The trip also included taking a plane fitted with these cameras to scan the base for the map structure and create a believable region so residents can be proud of their hometown, being given recognition for being a place filled with anarchic cult members and illustrious violence. To this day, only a select few games have used photogeometry to this extent, with the most notable titles that put this technology on the map being The Vanishing of Ethan Carter and Battlefield 1. The modified Crytek engine that powered the original game and its subsequent sequels has been tweaked and pushed to what seems like its limits here, but don't be fooled, for unlike other proprietary engines utilised by Ubisoft, like the Snowdrop engine that Ubisoft uses for everything from South Park to The Division, this is the same engine that powered Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 4. A welcome new feature for gun fanatics is the introduction of individually modelled shells and gun casing. Each bullet fired from your weapon of choice has a serial number embedded in the cartridge, as well as for the first time in the series, Ubisoft has put extra effort into remodelling each weapon to abide by the laws of physics, meaning in short, bullets actually travel instead of leaving traces like so many other games. So get your practice with guns in now, because one day you too could be the next Dick Cheney. This may be a throwaway little detail that many may forget about upon playing, however it just shows how far the engine has come since its inception. Though the location of Montana may seem like an unusual choice for a video game, considering only 2 games have ever used this location, and both of them are Ubisoft titles. The first of them being Far Cry 5, and the second being the Ubisoft published Call of Juarez Gunslinger, which puts Ubisoft in a very unique position to diversify their product from others releasing on the same day, most notably Outlast 2 on the Switch, which released on the same time as Far Cry 5. This could have been seen as worrying for some. Upon its initial unveiling, Far Cry caused controversy, with many claiming it copied Outlast 2, so this may be just coincidental. But it does come across as malicious. Then again, it could also be because the week Far Cry 5 releases marks one of the most religious times in the Christian calendar, in the week that houses both Good Friday and Easter Sunday. For clarity, I'm Roman Catholic, but haven't really bothered with my religion unless there's some benefits involved, and so far the only one I've found is death. So that's fun. You know, at least the atheist can be on the ground and I can be in the clouds somewhere. Like game saves on Xbox One. Speaking of death threats, before the first trailer even dropped, religious groups are already rather cross. Apparently making a white American Christian a bad guy was a step too far, and electing him as president was just taking the piss.
Problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards.
Hello, please.
Now I got you, slowpoke Rodriguez, and next I get your collie. Then, yes, master. What is your wish, sir?
The pussycat friend. He's nice and stupid.
To be fair, that isn't even the worst raging bull joke I'm going to make in this video, because there is a mission in this game in which you literally castrate the bollocks of some bulls. That's basically what Robert De Niro did at the Tony Awards.
Ladies and gentlemen, Robert De Niro.
I'm going to say one thing. Fuck Trump.
When you love someone, you've got to trust them. There's no other way. You've got to give them the key to everything that's yours. Otherwise, what's the point? And for a while, I believed that's the kind of love I had.
On a more serious side, the innovative name for the fictitious cult in this game shares close similarities to the real biblical nutter group Heaven's Gate. Whether the name was intentional or not is still up for debate, but none can deny that the name may be too close for comfort for some people. The real cult was set up by one Marshall Applewhite, a son of a soldier and a minister, who was kicked out of St. Thomas University in Texas for having an alleged homosexual encounter with one of his students. After he was thrown out the back doors, he met up and started the crazed cult with one Bonnie Nettles, a 44-year-old married nurse with an interest in biblical philosophy. The two would go on to form Heaven's Gate, a part Christian and Scientology hybrid, in which they would recruit people and tell them of Jesus' resurrection, claiming if they killed themselves, they would be reborn on the mothership. The blind believers would then venture out to do the cult's bidding, with soft-spoken words and an unwillingness to drag in new members into the cult that they dubbed the Crew. Later, in 1975, they rehearsed a passage to the followers, mentioning the end of days are coming. The blind followers said goodbye to their loved ones and vanished from the public eye, with the group going underground and the remaining disciples being dragged across the country, all the while invading the media, cameras and sleeping rough, begging for change on the streets. The head of the group slithered around the attention of the authorities and deputies that were there to arrest them, going by different pseudonyms each step of the journey and delving deeper into madness. Applewhite believed he was related to Jesus, which buried the cult deeper into its dark hole. Then the 1980s happened, and more were recruited into the group. Sociologists believe that the alternative religious movement actually helped the group gain more members at a rapid pace, gathering more acclaimed personalities to follow their cause. One such key member of the cult was John Craig, a respected Republican, but the sword of Damocles would eventually fall in the summer of 1985 with the unexpected death of Bonnie Nettles. From this point on, Applewhite would cast a larger net for recruiters via the internet video uploads on their site at the time, which would gather millions of views that would even make PewDiePie look small in comparison. Then in 1997 came the final sinister message taped by Applewhite himself, in which he claimed, "We have to eradicate the earth," and the answer was clear: mass suicide.
Has some big bank account somewhere that they're taking whatever possessions that followers can get. I wish you'd show me where that bank account so that we could use it to get this information out. Everyone's quick to condemn. I mean, they don't even see anymore. They just see a tiny little aspect of someone else and they quickly determine that they're so brilliant that they can judge it as being not what they're looking for, worthless, some radical movement, some movement that certainly is beneath them. I'll tell you about a kingdom level beyond here, and if you want to go there, then you have to follow me, because I'm the guy who's got the key at the moment. And it requires that you, if you move into that evolutionary kingdom, that you leave behind everything of human ways, human behavior, human ignorance, human misinformation. Now, breaking away from the world is not easy. It's difficult. It's tough. And breaking away doesn't mean that, you know, I'm going to go live in some place with this little cult and I'll, you know, spend time on weekends or at least on holidays with the family that I left because they're my no. It means that you leave that world behind. You even become another individual. It means that even the mind that you had as a human is aborted, and the soul that was given to you is filled with next level information, next level mind, and a new creature is born. Most renditions of human artists of extraterrestrials are the most grotesque things that you can possibly imagine. Look like some praying mantis or some insect that has some crazy shape or form, and that's ridiculous. They are perfectly beautiful suits of clothes. They are perfectly beautiful bodies, neither male nor female. They don't need to have hair that needs to be cut. They don't need to have curlers. They don't need to use makeup. It's a body that exists, except when it has to go to a place like planet Earth. It's a body that exists, for the most part, in a non-destructive environment. So it's potentially an eternal body, a everlasting body. This is your chance. I'm here. I can take you out of here. I can lead you into that kingdom level above human. That can't happen unless you leave the human world that you're in and come and follow me. Time is short. Last chance.
In a quiet, affluent...
The group rented a large 9,000 by 200 foot gated community guarded by Heaven's Gate, and by March of the same year the decomposing bodies of the group and their cult leader Marshall Applewhite would be found by police officials and later cremated by the state, leaving nothing but a faded memory and dust in the wind.
What so many people are now calling the Heaven's Gate cult. Investigators in San Diego this afternoon said they've now notified the vast majority of families that one of their relatives committed suicide with other cult members this week. We have learned more today about who they were as individuals, why they were fixated on UFOs, about how they died, and how they left behind many other people who knew not of what they were doing. Many of them were in and out of the cult over a period of 20 years or more. First, let's hear from ABC's Judy Muller.
Now that's what real controversy looks like, but like a moth to a flame, the game also attracted some irrelevant ramblings from the gaming sites. As the weeks drew closer to its initial launch, the oversensitive problematic controversy reared its ugly head, with GameSpot complaining about one particular character using the phrase Obama-loving libtards, creating a huge stink out of a little smell. Of course, taken out of context, they rolled with it and spat out a few articles on their site, trying to gain steam, when the general public could see that this was fake controversy at best and a failed publicity stunt at worst. We live in a world that has more horrors than what can converse out of a person's lips, and with everyone in their aunt arguing about the real President Trump, this whole debacle is a moot point. We don't need a dozen articles asking the most metrodorous of philosophical questions to their viewers, such as, what does this mean, man? Is this guy a secret bad guy? It's so weird, it doesn't fit. You've been given a platform to spread the news to those who crave it. Either fix the stage or get off the set.
You're getting on my last nerve. Get over here. Hey, you're that sumbitch Dutch was going on about.
I was watching some footage with you guys with the guy running for Senate who's a quest giver.
Who's also Herc's dad.
Herc's dad?
The dude that said Obama-loving libtards.
If them Obama-loving libtards find out I can't look after my own property, I can kiss this Senate run goodbye.
Just watching that guy, I don't understand what tone they're going for with him, because I'm like, okay, he's not a villain, he's not like, but he's a quest giver, so is he just kind of meant to be an asshole? Am I supposed to like him? What are they trying to say with the characters in this game? I don't really know.
As you can probably tell, this sort of behaviour really annoys me. So yet again, GameSpot and the Associated Press, I thought I would nip this controversy right in the bud. Ubisoft stated in an interview that you conducted that the team was trying to create a believable backdrop and authentic characters to inhabit this pseudo-realistic take on the heartland of the USA. So stop complaining about the mirage in the desert, because if you paid close enough attention instead of blindly walking into the storm, you'd find out there's nothing actually there. Moving on, 2 weeks before the launch of the game, Ubisoft went back to the director's chair and released Inside Eden's Gate, a mini feature on Amazon Prime. The Blair Witch film featurette was made in collaboration with Asylum Entertainment, also known as the guys publishing the Lost in Limbo game Identity. And let's be honest, that game's going to take longer to come out than Barry Manilow. The production of this feature closely resembles the marketing tactics used for Far Cry 3, in which a very similar live-action miniseries was released to push the primal antagonist Vaz to the public. The Far Cry 3 feature was filmed where geometrically the real location of the game was set, on the sun-kissed beaches of Thailand, and saw that McLovin kid from Superbad as the protagonist, with Michael Mandor given a stellar performance as the iconic crazed pirate Vaz Montenegro. Each episode would play out like a bite-sized choose-your-own-adventure game, in which you could choose whether McLovin lived or died, and since the actor's next project would be the critically panned movie 43, I think the latter option would have been more of a mercy kill than anything else.
Nathan, on a date for once.
Jesus, Mikey, shut up!
What? Mom told me to watch you guys. I'm just doing my job.
I mean it, Mikey, leave!
Hey, be quiet, let me focus!
After the marketing campaign ended, the head of McLovin could be found on one of the game's beaches. This was also the first feature to be filmed under the Universal Ubisoft Pictures brand. The same company would then put out the Assassin's Creed movie and then go on to further film the Division movie, Ghost Recon, Rabbids 1 and of course Splinter Cell movies respectively. Given that this is actor Greg Beck's first time doing video game work, this isn't the first actor in the Far Cry franchise to be in a fish out of water situation, however, as actor De La Rocia Rivera, the main villain from Far Cry Primal, also had no video game background before taking on the challenging role. On a counterpoint, Vaz, the most iconic character in this franchise and portrayed wonderfully by the talented Michael Montour, actually had experience in video games before his breakout role in Far Cry 3, in which he voiced Francesco in Shaun White's Snowboarding 2010. And that entire sentence just sounded like an excerpt from your local phone book. Excluding Far Cry 5, the series has had 9 other mainline games in this franchise, and that's not including the countless times they have released the original for the Wii, PS3, PS4, among other platforms, to such an extent that even Capcom is telling them to reel it back in a bit.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Lois, this is not my Batman gland.
I guess Vaz was just telling the consumer the definition of insanity, which to my knowledge, insanity is releasing the same product every generation, with a new gimmick attached, and expecting the experience to be different. The series is also known in a more mainstream sense overseas, in Germany with the live action film from the Steven Spielberg of unflushable crap with Uwe Boll. The film takes elements from the first game and then promptly throws them into the bin for a convoluted action flick that the director could claim as a tax expense. At least in England, all we claim tax breaks on is Kit Kat bars and hookers, and not a $30 million waste of film. The only use that case of film has now is strangling someone with the negatives or using the case to bash someone's head in. But following in the is this quicksand or have I always been this short approach to adapting the iconic brands, Ubisoft must have loved this feature so much because years later, and for a staggering $125 million budget, they released Assassin's Creed the motion picture, because apparently the human race hasn't suffered enough yet. Assassin's Creed the movie was a film so bland I was expecting Hadrian Christensen to narrate the opening and tell the audience how much he hates sand by the 10-minute mark.
I don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets everywhere. Not like here. Here everything is soft and smooth.
Get down there!
Hope County, USA, a mountainous region spanning 3 biomes filled with verdant hues, breathtaking vistas, and reviewers that don't know what the hell they're talking about. Our lunar narrative dissident's purpose for being here is to take down a crazed outcast who started his own cult entitled Eden's Gate. For a game that had its backlash from Outlast fans upon its initial reveal, It doesn't do much in its opening hour to differentiate itself from that controversy, and instead, a lot like Far Cry 5's fire propagation system, only ceases to fan the flames.
Oh fuck, there he is. Crazy motherfucker. Jesus. We're official.
All the mercury in that woman's blood, she had to have spent at least a decade downstream from some pretty heavy industry.
You said turn this bird around. You want me to ignore a federal warrant, Sheriff? No, sir. I want you to understand the reality of this situation. Joseph Seed, he's not a man to be fucked with. We've had run-ins with him before. They haven't always gone our way.
Cuff this son of a bitch.
God will not let you take me.
Rook, put the cuffs on him.
Sometimes the best thing to do is to walk away.
Our mission doesn't go as planned, as the cult goes full iRobot and starts jumping into the blades of the helicopter after you acquire their leader. Yes, apparently this game is still set off in the realms of reality. The chopper crashes and
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
and the dishevelled Troy Baker lookalike starts to layer over us. It's at this moment we know we're alone. He informs the woman on the radio not to send for backup and then plays a violent game of cat and mouse with us. Welcome to the family, son.
We're putting his whole family away. All of them.
Lying,
Lunatics.
but now I see.
Yeah, this weekend. First things first. Horses. Here. Alright. Here's what we're gonna do. There's a road out there. We're gonna take it. We're gonna head northeast.
We wake up hours later inside a bunker, and are then treated to the basic gameplay mechanics and fundamentals that will be taking place over the course of the next 100 hours or so. The Walking Dead deal lookalike then prompts us to remove our clothes and change into something else. God, I hope this is still part of the game and not the opening of Apocalypse Now. This acts as our introduction to the character creation options, which will also show your created character on wanted posters scattered around the world. It's a neat little detail that many may have missed, so I took my time going through the options. You can choose between boy and girl, and after careful consideration I decided to play as O.J. Simpson. Because if I'm going to spend my majority of my time speeding across the roads of America while invading people before shooting them back of the head, I might as well go the whole hog. After the creation of our deputy douchebag is out of the way and you try to comprehend how you can change your sex in this bunker, which is clearly not a surgical clinic, it was time to start our journey. Far Cry 5 doesn't just have the writer of Bioshock Infinite in common with it, the game also borrows a lot of its environmental storytelling. Within the first 5 minutes we can create a detailed description for our bunker buddy. He's a loner that has family issues, considering the last time his grandkids came to visit, he gave one a gun which sent his daughter into a furious rage. He believes in the fall of society, which broke his relationship with his partner a long time ago, and he used to have ties at the cult, but now wants to end their tyrannical regime. It's nice to play a game in which the world tells a story and not some cutscene filled with exposition, spouting about how the elves so hot. I've seen LZ's Tinder profile and the LZ looks more like a bleached pug's anus in the midday sun. Hashtag not like other girls. Some may say this game is a breath of fresh air. As for me, I like to call it Breath of the Wild. Far Cry 5 does have a few things in common with the Nintendo Marvel, and not just the little things like how your character awakens in a small temple/bunker before venturing out into the woods, or the fact that both games have a white fat bearded dude providing advice before telling you to climb a tower within the first hour. They also have a mega mall of a world map, and like a prudent and nudist camp you don't know where to look. There's so many things to see and do in Far Cry, and no two things are ever the same. It's a perfect example of how a game can stretch out its basic formula over an elongated amount of time. I cut across the mountains of Montana, picking up pink bones, and then shot out a cult outpost, which can now be reset via the outpost master setting tucked within the options menu. Next I found a prepper stash, which is Far Cry's equivalent to Fallout Vaults, mini segmented stories that flesh out the world and yield massive rewards. After which I blew up a highly flammable church and unlocked a van, and all this was done on the first small island, so I had dreams of what to come. The man tunes in on the radio to inform us to climb a radio tower, showing that Ubisoft is either very bitchy, or at least has a good sense of humour, or gets a community to write the jokes for them through Hit Record. This is just a small example of the variety of side quests on offer, and they only get more bizarre from here on out. You can acquire an alien weapon which shows those aliens in Area 51 are packing. Next you can enter a haunted house, and there's even a mission in which you reacquire a tape of Donald Trump enjoying urination.
The call. I've been sent here on a special mission from the big man himself. Jesus tap dancing Christ, just saying that gets me semi-erect. Pardon my French. I need to recover a tape that, if released, could make him look bad to the public.
Which isn't a surprise. I mean, the man has solid golden elevators and painted golden chairs. It's only fitting he enjoys a golden shower once in a while. Oh wait, just been handed something here to cover me for that last joke. Far Cry is not a political game, nor does it seek to make any political statements or jabs at any important people, being living or dead. It is pure coincidental that we have games that just so happen to provide a subtle political message, be it with the destruction of DC in The Division, or how we showcase the terror and dread of a post-Brexit London with a character that resembles Theresa May and other cabinet members. We here at Ubisoft will never make a political statement, and instead beat around the bush like lesbian porn. And that is signed by Ubisoft PR. Okay, back to the video. After our brief vacation was over on this lonely island, it was time to take the Griswolds off to Wally World. So I jumped in my Cadillac and proceeded to Falls End. My excursion was cut short, however, as I was met with a world of possibilities. Far Cry 5 takes a Ghost Recon approach to the story. You can tackle any of the underbosses in any order you like, so I decided to stick on the straight path and headed straight to John, with the game telling me to just say yeah. Along the way I heard a distant bark coming from the field, and after power sliding around the pumpkin patch, I arrived with a gun in my hand to see a caged dog called Boomer being terrorised by the cult. In a fit of rage I shot both these thugs turned killers. They don't look a thing like Jesus, but they'll be seeing them soon enough. Actually no they won't, because this is classed as animal abuse, so they'll be going to hell. I freed the dog living a Montana lifestyle and acquired Boomer as my first fangs for hire. They are free in the game, each with their own unique perks and abilities. I became excited when the developer said, and I quote, "Everyone in Montana has a dog," which means the local private investigator probably has a Snoop Dogg and the whorehouse probably has a few growlers. Boom boom tch. So I was ready for another piece of interactive entertainment inspired by a film of Boy and His Dog, which surprisingly is a euphemism for masturbation. In the same way that Uber is not indicative of I want to be killed by a stranger, that at least has a driver's license. Boomer is a dog that every player will probably go with while venturing out on Far Cry 5, making the rest of the remaining cast more redundant than the members of NSYNC when Justin Timberlake left. The team spent a meticulous amount of time trying to make Boomer as realistic as possible, and that's why, just like a real dog, he doesn't follow any of your orders, but at least he does look cute disobeying you. Some may even say he's a scrappy little fella. With the dog by my side, I thought now I'd venture off into Falls End so we can continue our story and sum up this critique. I couldn't have been more wrong, however, as I travelled for approximately 4 minutes and screeched the car to a halt. I was now at my first major outpost and ready to check out the systemic gameplay opportunities. So I set Boomer off to scout out the area and climbed up a local billboard for a vantage point, taking out enemies from afar. This didn't go as planned, however, as I got ambushed relatively easy. I don't know what gave away my position. Was it the fact that I forgot the button for switching different ammo types and accidentally threw rocks signaling the enemies to where I was? Or was it the fact that I was trying to stealthily take down my adversaries with a bazooka and half a bag of grenades? Whatever it was, they swarmed me like bees around honey and knocked me off my pedestal. It was at this point I realised Far Cry 5 disregarded the healing animations from the previous entries. No longer would I be slowly pulling out shards of glass from my arm as a car explodes near me, or digging out a bullet with a rusted blade. Instead, I would be using bandages and medkits to survive in the wilds, which is still less painful than watching any of the stand-up gigs on Netflix.
I don't know if you guys know this, but this past year I've gotten very rich, famous, and humble.
This is one thing I don't like about Far Cry 5, but I guess it adds to the tone. You're in a breathtaking world but don't have the time to take a picture. Finally, after a few more failed attempts, I slipped into a perfect run and took out the outpost with a celebration of new faces to meet and greet. I walked up to the weapon dealer who stood there blasting 80s music from his speakers and greeted him with another relic that needs to go: microtransactions. Fortunately, this feature is inconsequential for most players. After just one outpost, I found a safe containing 80 silver bars, which is the game's premium currency. This was just enough silver to buy myself a new weapon attachment before seeing another man beckoning me over to talk. This was my introduction to the game's varied ecosystem and the hunting mechanic that accompanied it. Unlike the previous games, hunting isn't that important as you won't be crafting anything, which does make this feature feel more like the alternative title to that Leonardo DiCaprio film, The Irrelevant. Still, it's a fun side activity which doesn't involve shooting people with beards and beads. The man informed me that there were some mutated beasts to take out in the forest, or as they're formerly known as, the Kardashians. I accepted the man's request and set out to find these Botox-filled Bambies. Apparently after drinking drug-infused water from the river they were in bad elk, so the humane thing to do was to
barbecue them alive with a flamethrower and take their pellets back to base.
On my way back I encountered a few more of the other woodland critters that inhabited Hope County. Mountain lions, boars, bears, oh my, and of course the honey badger of this game, the Wolverine. Unfortunately, Hugh Jackman isn't reprising his role for this creature, so he made like Logan and shot it in the head.
You don't have to fight anymore. Go.
Now with the weight of pelts on my shoulder, I returned to the man and was given a reward and a new activity to do. Fall's End would have to wait a day longer before their saviour would come to town. Dawn broke on day 2, and being a millennial I wasn't feeling like being a conversationalist, which is a tad annoying considering that's the only way you obtain new missions in this game, with the mission markers gone and replaced by talking to every person that graces your eye line. So I decided to take in an extensive fleshed out fishing minigame instead. Let's be honest, Ubisoft had to drag the COD fans into this somehow. It's not as fleshed out to give you the backstories on your catch of the day. I mean, you're not going to read about the fish that Madonna molested. Sturgeon. However, what it does tell you is how big and fat the aquatic wildlife is. Hours have passed now and the people of Fall's End look anxiously up the road for their hero to arrive, and yet not even the sound of an engine roar could be heard approaching their quaint little town. For I had other things to do. The Fast and the Furious was calling, and as a nod to Ubisoft Days of the Drivers franchise, they implemented a series of intense time trials and stunt driving courses under the guise of a famed fictitious hero, Clutch Nixon. The sun started to go down and another day ended. By day 3 I will make it to Fall's End. The sun arose from the mountains and day 3 began. I started the day like any other, checking out the new mechanics and content, find out about the contextual takedown system, in which you stand behind an object, be it a door, and pressing the takedown option will initiate a different takedown animation every time. The birds chirped in the trees and bears roared in the woods as I pushed on to my next objective. Fall's End can wait. The next objective came, and then something changed. The enemies changed, and so did my adventure. From that outpost on I became marked. The patience of the enemies have reached their limit, and I was brought to the water to be cleansed of my sins.
In the light of God, and walk through his gates unto Eden. Not this one. This one's not clean. Shh. You mock the cleansing, John? No, Joseph.
You have to love them, John. Do not let your sin prevent that. Bring that one to me. Despite all that you have done, you are not beyond salvation. You're not here by accident or by chance. You are here by the grace of God. You've been given a gift. Now it remains to be seen whether you choose to embrace it or to cast it aside. This one shall reach the atonement, or the gates of Eden shall be shut to you, John.
Yes, Joseph. You will confess every sin you've ever committed, no matter how petty, no matter how small. I will pull from you. Then we'll see if you're worthy of atonement.
The inevitability of death loomed over me, and as the van drove along the same roads I once did days prior, my mind started to wander about my initial bad decision that brought me here. Should I have just went to Fall's End? Fortunately, Fall's End came to me. The van I was travelling in collided with another vehicle, and I was flung through the air and laid breathless on the ground. The chance of a man of God loomed over my unconscious body, and with my final breath I saw the Book of Eli offering me guidance and giving me a gun in my hand and a smile on his face. He uttered the first friendly words I have ever heard in this region.
Hell no, to the no, no, no. Yeah, to the no, yeah, to the no, to the no, no, no. Listen, Sister Anna, Sister Ruth, make sure that everybody get a seat. Come on, y'all. Sister Lily may go back in the kitchen, cause when I get through, I need to eat. I must fix me collard greens and cornbread and rice, chicken breast, oxtails on the side. That's what I'm talking about. Deacon Underwood, get my business ready, cause when I get through, I need a ride. Come on. Dr. West, count the money, come back and tell us what you raised. We had to find another deacon. I got some people there looking for some blessing. First, God got to get the praise. Come on, y'all. See, there's an old saying, when the praises go up, you get the blessing coming down. I got some people in the church, God Almighty, look at them, they messing around. Come on, come on. Woo.
We pushed back the cult and helped the remaining captives while getting bombarded by mortar strikes. After finally reaching the chopper, we escaped and was left with a few passing words from the priest that saved my life. "Come help us at Fall's End." I stood motionless and then said, "Sod that, I'm going fishing." On my way to the local lake, I came across the heart attack animal of this game. Every Far Cry entry has one. Far Cry 3 had the crocodiles, Far Cry 4 had the demon fish, and Far Cry 5 has the goddamn snakes in the goddamn lake. I was bitten by the venomous viper and skunked 3 seconds later. Perhaps this is punishment for not following the advice of a priest, but then again, you've seen how quiet them church mice can be. I still pressed on and relaxed with some fishing, in which I caught the Tony Hadley of the aquatic world. Trout. With a song in my heart, I went to bed happy after a stressful day. Day 4 started and I was informed my bravery days prior had inspired the residents of Fall's End to reclaim the town for themselves. They didn't need a knight in a flannel shirt to ride in and dispel the evil that terrorized them. It was at this moment I realized how dynamic Far Cry 5 actually was. I'm used to seeing NPCs wait hand and foot on the player's engagement to proceed on with their miserable lives. Roman would still be working a dead-end job until Nico shows up. Hyrule would still remain in chaos until Link steps into the fray, and the criminals will still be roaming the plains until John Marston comes to town. So seeing characters live their lives and fend for themselves is a note of our words innovative. I crossed a cornfield on my way to Fall's End and ended up reenacting that famous scene from North by Northwest. If armoured convoys weren't going to slow down my rampage, then I guess planes will. I ran as fast as I could and finally made it to Fall's End. My reception was frosty at best, with the owner of the bar, Mary May, sarcastically congratulating me on finally showing up, and a deafening silence filled the air before it was cut open with one sentence from the local cook. "This town needs balls." I went out searching for these illustrious goose eggs and noticed that my resistance meter was slowly filling up. Before I even had the first sack in my hand, I was marked again. Bollocks. I woke with John dominating over me with the 3 most scariest letters I have ever heard. Yes. A word that I ceased to utter, which pissed off John to the point of wrath.
So who wants to go first?
Which one? This is lesson number 1. Someone's got to choose! For fuck's sake, we'll start with you.
You won't regret this. I promise. Now, before we begin, I think it's only proper that Deputy Hudson goes back to her room. Confessions are supposed to be private, after all.
He took my female partner to one side and left me alone. Bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. From this point on, I would need to find my fellow female deputy and put an end to all of this. The next mission felt like a retelling of the opening hours of Wolfenstein 2, as I was trapped in a chair as I slowly edged towards the stairs. Upon being freed from my shackles, I grabbed a pipe and began to work my way through the facility.
I've fallen, and I can't get up!
This is where the true horror unfolded. The cult has been experimenting on humans, which would explain the crazed erratic behaviour of Shia LaBeouf.
Just do it!
Hopefully that joke is still relevant when this audio comes out and he hasn't died in a car crash, if you catch my drift. These Outlast wannabes are a creation of faith, another adversary for another day, as John taunted me every step and swing as I slaughtered each member in cold blood. For a police officer, I didn't play by the book. I finally arrived at the exit, and just like Star Wars, it's a trap! John put the base on lockdown and filled the room with a chemical substance known as bliss.
I know your sin. It drives you. Every thought, every action. Your sin is wrath. So, I'll indulge you. Become wrath. Let it fill your body and consume your soul, because in the end, you'll still be empty. And I'll be waiting right here. We both will.
It's basically the equivalent of living in a Florida neighborhood. You know, breathing in the Florida air and then seeing Terry down the street using a snake as a belt with mice gaffer tape to his fingers. John absolved me of my wrath but not my mind. With the room becoming more hazier by the second, I frantically scoured the room for an exit, before the haze took over and I begun to divulge into singing corn songs. After bursting through the metal doors that once acted as my prison, I was free but not forgotten about. A fellow NPC summed up my experience nicely as I pondered my next move. A new adventure that's similar but with just enough novelty to justify the cost. Basically the equivalent of every single Bethesda game in existence. My next plan was now laid out. I sent my weirdo Yankovic buddy back to the UHF, installed his shoes in the process, obtained the alien weapon, the game's equivalent to the BFG, and set out to find help. My first port of call led me to a valiant sniper named Grace Armstrong, and after the battle that ensued within the confines of a local graveyard, she agreed to help me rid the world of those who wanted to destroy it. After we dispelled our grave danger, next on my recruitment drive was Nick Rye. If I was planning on creating an A-team, I would need some explosions along the way. Nick was under heavy fire from the cult, so my logical step was to fight fire with propellers. I stole a plane from John Seed's ranch and headed off to save our new acquaintance. You're my eyes, Goose. Fuck a turkey! After a few bombardments, I took to the sky like Harrison Ford.
Amateur pilot just missed a commercial jet when he landed on the wrong taxiway, and you can hear his confusion on the tape.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Crashing my plane immediately into a field and running away before it burst into a flaming inferno, going down at the reception to the latest Star Wars film. Finally we saved Nick and his business, but it was all too much for our aviator, as Nick empathetically left, grabbing his bags and saying goodbye to Hope County, before his wife, now pregnant, ultimately changed his mind. She was going into labour, which is ironic considering so many of the game's political views shift towards being conservative. With a sudden change of heart, Nick agreed to stay and protect his unborn baby girl. Welcome to the family, daughter. Day 5 felt eerie from the crack of dawn. I headed off into the woods and met up with a Vietnam vet doing his best Jeff Bridges impression after serving his time at the RIPD department. This was the day that I confessed. Today would be John Seed's atonement. The bells rang out of the Falls End Church, where a congregation of unwieldy souls gathered to confess their sinful ways. John stood in the cavalier manner, mocking us for our attempts, and proceeded to ask us to say the word that shan't be uttered. My first failure resulted in Nick being butchered. The second, Pastor Jerome being assaulted.
It's just one word.
Just say yes.
third John being shot. With his seed sprayed all over the back wall, we hopped in the back of a 4x4 and shot our way through the countryside to John's end. The man wasn't going down without a fight, as he jumped in his plane and took to the skies.
We are prepared for this.
Use the barrel roll!
But just like Icarus before him, this angel would soon have his wings clipped. His plane came crashing down to earth as he parachuted to safety. I ejected myself from the pilot's seat and shot at him on my descent. With one well-placed shot to the cranium, John was down. With his last breath seeping from his lungs, I stood over him and said the most devastating word he's heard in his life. Yes!
What if Joseph is right? Did you ever stop to think about that? Everyone thinks he's crazy, but he's not. Look around you. This world is on the brink. You can feel it in your bones. Look at the headlines. Look who's in charge. You want this key? Because you think you're saving people, but they are already safe. We had a plan. You don't understand. You don't believe. You don't care! May God have mercy on your soul.
The end of the week was full of blissful moments. I played baby driver for Nick's wife and welcomed a new child into the chaos that consumed us.
Meet your goddaughter? She's so beautiful. Well, looks like I am gonna have to change the name of my business after all, huh?
You probably don't hear this enough, but thank you for everything that you've done. Whatever you need, we'll be there for you.
Come on. Let's get you home.
And then made like George Michael and had a little faith, the next adversary to take down.
Welcome to the bliss. I know you've heard stories about me. That I'm a liar. A manipulator. That I poison people's minds. Well, let me tell you a different story. A true story. There once was a young woman who had been ostracized by her community, bullied by friends, abused by her family. She took to a needle for help. She was all alone. She wanted to die.
And then she met the father. He gave her hope and confidence. The father showed her how special she was. She was full of love and life. He gave her a new family, one that accepted her just as she was. The young woman no longer wished to die. She had been given purpose. One day, the father brought her here. He asked if she had faith in him. He asked if she would be willing to die for him. The young woman who very much wished to live was scared. The father told her this was her test. He would have faith in her if she had faith in him. So she closed her eyes and left. The father kept his word. The path to Eden is clear to those who have faith.
Walk the path.
I seem to have fallen down a cliff. I'm still alive, but I'm very badly injured. I think my legs might be broken, but I'll try to stand up. Ah! Yes, they are broken. Perhaps you could toss me a Band-Aid or some antibacterial cream. I'm in an extraordinarily large amount of pain.
After a literal leap of faith, it was time to follow the righteous path. The path led me to the 8-bit diner, a hub area for your companions that have been dismissed. After a few words with Grace and the rest of Mystery Incorporated, I set out on the road to retribution.
Like zoiks! We're one in them 15 states for multiple counts of murder, man. No Scooby Snack's gonna save us now, Scoob. We're gonna need to stick in this van for the rest of our days.
Before I could even stop to smell the roses, I was blessed and submerged into the abyss. I awoke far away from Shangri-La and listened to our enemies tiptoe around the reasons why they fight, all because of fear that some sun-bleached owl in the White House could destroy everything they have built.
This is the world? This is the world we built for our children? Communities being torn apart? Walls being erected because leaders are too impotent to act. Bullies are too adult to lead righteously.
I did not ask for this. I was chosen.
Because I don't want to be controversial.
The fear started to creep in. We were on the edge of collapse, and you could feel it. My trip ended in a nightmare. Soon after, I was infected by the drug that addled the mind of the weak and purged the mind of the strong.
Let me tell you what the definition of insanity is.
My last hours of week 1 was a blur. I remember helping Roseanne Barr find her pussy Peaches, a cougar with a lust for cultist flesh and Twitter rants, and climbing to the top of the highest point in the region, but after that nothing but blackness. Week 2 began after coughing up the last of that substance and tracking down the marshal. I returned to the bliss and kept my mind stronger than those with faith, but I didn't predict the honesty that would cut through the fiction and stab at our heart. The marshal said something that not many games ever say. Real life sucks. I mean, take life insurance. Great, I'm a millionaire. Once I'm dead. And I mean, look at these models on TV over 90. Man, at that age, people don't want to see you modelling bathing suits and bikinis. They want to see you modelling coffins.
Have you ever stopped and looked at how your life's turned out? I mean, what you've actually done with it, you know? We're told we can be anything, right? A famous singer, Hall of Famer, movie star. We're all gonna be a success, Rook. But no, that's just not true. We live mundane lives, just doing what someone else tells us to do, day after day. Everybody thinks they have free will, but come on, when's the last time you did something that wasn't required? Demanded? Nah, Rook. We don't live our lives. We live theirs. And we think we have free will. But that is just a lie. An illusion. Oh, man. I am so done with that. I am done with being the yes man. I am done with being the errand boy. And I am done with being the garbage collector. I am so done.
With this knowledge embedded in my subconscious, I ventured out to cripple Faith's father figure and destroyed the massive statue that loomed over the region. Fidel be damned. Next up on my checklist was taking out some more of these drug-induced animals. I already ran over a Snoop Dogg, so next up on my list was Winnie the Pothead. I shot the bear in his cave and sent him into a permanent hibernation.
Deep in the 100-acre wood, Winnie the Pooh and his friends have had many great adventures, and here's a particularly fun.
It's shite being Scottish! With the lowest of the low! The scum of the fucking earth!
And though their clever plan had worked, they were still without the precious honey. That would unfortunately have to wait for another day, and yes, another adventure.
The day was getting on, so the last few hours seeping away, I put the bass and bastard fishing and tried to catch the biggest creature I could. The next day my sarcastic humour finally paid off. I was on the set of a movie, more specifically Blood Dragon 3, so awesome they skipped over the sequel and finished the trilogy ahead of schedule. Guy Marvel took me over to one side and congratulated me on my courageous efforts, but also let his tongue slip on what he actually thought of games like Far Cry.
Seriously? It has to be. I can't go back to working on shit like Far Cry. I'd rather put my balls in a vice and listen to everyone with their fucking opinions about world building and player motivation and believability. Oh, I'll kill myself, I swear to fucking God. Oh, and I wasn't kidding before. Closed set. Get the fuck out of here.
With the bountiful amounts of negativity in the air, I rushed myself to the isolated ghost town entitled Prosperity and met up with our Breaking Bad bud Tweak. The place looked like if Nuketown and a small town from the Crystal Skull had a baby and shot it full of heroin. Or as the game likes to call them, performance enhancers. hours were without worries as I reenacted the scene from 300 with 3 angels.
This is Sparta!
Before I could inject myself with one more taste of the good stuff, this day was over and the next day would begin. The day started out on terror and ended in disaster. The marshal betrayed us, but like the sword of Damocles, one man's hubris would die as a weary soul was lost to faith. The final phase was in place, back into the bliss and out with blood on my hands. Faith quickly turned into Alma from the Fear games, which is fitting considering Dan Hayes started out working on Fear too. While I raced around the arena, I picked up a heavy machine gun and said no to drugs. With a red mist dispelling from the veins that once held the escape of reality, it was over and faith was gone.
You still don't understand. You don't know what it is you're doing, do you? Joseph believes he's our savior. But you will be the one who decides what happens. You are the start. He'll be the end. It was always gonna happen this way. You'll walk the path. You'll rescue your sheriff. You'll be a hero. And then you'll choose. And if you don't listen to him, he'll be right.
As she fell, I picked up the silent princess flower and took a deep inhale of breath of the wild. I arrived at the last region of the map with a foreboding, ominous feeling shadowing over me. And where the map layout for John's region was peaceful to reflect his tone of his demeanour, and Faith's region was full of winding roads that become chaotic, Jacob's region is hectic. Well, that always being shafted by the rest of the family, I stepped out my vehicle and was immediately attacked by the judges, a pack of wolves infused by the bliss. This was no country for old men, as I made myself cautiously to the lumber mill where a distress call could be heard. I took out the guards patrolling the perimeter and captured the area back from the clutches of evil. Quiet from Metal Gear Solid thanked me for my efforts.
Go. Kept you waiting, huh?
I scarpered back to my truck with the distant sound of howling and sped off into the mountains. A voice beckoned me over to help him run for office, and that's where I met GameSpot's Most Hated Character Award and the real top trump of the Far Cry franchise, Herc. Basically Larry the Cable Guy with more guns and less brains. He taught me about the Monkey King as we made our way through the mountainous region on a false errand, get back his father's truck and get rid of his son. I anxiously looked around Herc's home en route to my next location, before taking an arrow to the knee and awakening in a room from a clockwork orange. I had been hunted.
You shouldn't come for me. You gotta run. The world is weak. Soft. We have forgotten what it is to be strong. You know, our heroes used to be gods. And now our heroes are godless. Weak. Feeble. Diseased. We let the weak dictate to the powerful, and then we are shocked to find ourselves adrift. But history knows the value of sacrifice. Of culling the herd so that it stays strong. Over and over, the lives of the many have outweighed the lives of the few. This is how we survived, and we've forgotten. And now, the bill has come due. Now, the collapse is upon us. And this time, the lives of the few outweigh the lives of the many. And when a nation that's never known hunger or desperation descends into madness, we'll be ready. We will cull the herd. We will do what needs to be done.
Weakness is why civilizations fail, ranted Jacob, pacing back and forward. He stood over me and picked up a small musical box, which sent my character into a fit. Waking up from my comatose state, I was instructed to relive the opening tutorial mission from Modern Warfare and take out faceless goons that spurted out the same dialogue the Far Cry 3 marketing campaign once used. Fuck, kill, sacrifice, they yelled. I preferred it when Vaz said these words.
Good job. We'll get him next time.
I awoke in a cage with the father looking over me. He told me how he had a baby girl that doesn't cry for daddy anymore.
One of you will be strong.
Not again. Get out of here, Peaches. I know you are in pain. The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh, huh? You're not the only one to be tested. Did you know that I had a wife? She's so beautiful, isn't she? We were pregnant with our first child. And we were just babies ourselves, really. And I was terrified. I'm becoming a father, mostly about money. She wasn't worried. She had faith that things were going to work out. She always had faith. And one day she was going to go visit a friend. There was an accident. And Lord, take it. They rushed me to a hospital and put me in a room with this little pink bundle stuffed with tubes. And they said that I had to be strong because my little girl was going to live. God was looking out for our daughter. And they left me alone in the room with her. I just stared at my daughter. So helpless, so innocent. And all she had in the world was me. When nobody from nowhere was. Fuck. And in that moment, I knew that God was testing me. He was laying out a path before me, and all I had to do was choose. So I put my hand on my little girl's head, and I leaned in and I could smell it. And we prayed together. Prayed for wisdom. Prayed for strength. And I knew. I heard God's plan for me. I took my fingers and I put them on that little plastic tube that was taped to her angelic face, and I pinched it shut. And after a little while, her legs began to kick in and kick. And then nothing. Stillness. Release. The Lord giveth, and the Lord taketh. Pain, sacrifice, these are all part of His test. When we have to prove that we can serve God, no matter what He asks. You've done well.
Ooh, diggy. I woke up Chris Breezy. Oh my God, I'm the man. I'm so fly and I can dance. There's tattoos on my neck.
No, God! No, God, please, no! No! No!
Before I knew it, I was dragged back into Willy Wonka's music box and made to relive the same mission over and over and over again. I'm sure Jacob's real name is Bill Murray because this entire part of the game feels like Groundhog's Day. Just like before, I killed and sacrificed a week before waking in a cage, but this time things felt a little different. The local deputy, which I clean forgot about, tried to spring me from my prison and help me escape. I could hear other prisoners begging to be let out, but he screamed at them with words straight from the Yazoo song. No, only you. He pushed me over the balcony to safety as the echoing of the madman's lullaby played over the speakers. I escaped, but now I felt the duty to return and save our forgettable friend. The end was upon us again, as I cleansed my head with a good old American pastime, riddling everything in sight with bullets just to obtain a new fishing rod. My mind still felt a little hazy, so I escaped to the mountains in search of peace, tranquility, and of course Bigfoot. Even in the highs of the open air, I still couldn't escape the tempo of my fate, and before I could even put my earplugs in, that damn song played again, and I was left to kill and sacrifice a week one more time. I sped through the course and ignored everything in my path, which quickly became my own downfall. I shot the last enemy, which turned out to be the only person that saved me from this madness. Eli was dead in my drug-induced state, and this chapter was closed. The world has a way of dealing with sinners who claim to fight for the freedom, and as the world burnt around me, I stepped outside and said, "Say goodnight to the bad guy." Jacob taunted me from a crumbling peak as I quickly rushed around this metaphorical battlefield, dispelling evil and banishing the fire back to the hell. I finally awoke to see no flames or destruction in my vision, only bodies and blood. Elmer Fudd still stood on the top of this mountain and aimed at my head. It was time for the hunter to experience being hunted. I snuck up the face of the mountain and surprised Jacob with a well-timed shot to the face. Clever girl. The high and mighty has soon seen the ground of the mortals as he limped over to a nearby rock and clenched at his last breath. The lamb was sacrificed, and I moved on to saving my friend.
I don't know if he talks to God. That doesn't matter. He was right. Humanity is once again in crisis. It doesn't matter what we build or achieve. We will always find a way to break it down. Babylon, Rome,
After arriving at the armory, it was too late to save his soul and mind, but not too late to save his body. He went from calm to Rambo in a matter of seconds.
Please. I'm sorry.
Rook, are you real?
I'm so sorry. No! Don't leave me here! Please don't kill me. Please. I'm sorry. Please.
He said I was weak.
Please. I'm so sorry.
That I deserved it.
No!
Maybe he was right.
No!
Maybe
Don't leave me here!
I deserved it.
Please don't kill me.
Maybe I
Please. I'm sorry. Please.
Maybe I did.
I did! Maybe I did!
Why don't you call my name? Won't it be a sledgehammer? This will be my testimony. Yeah.
They made me strong. And now they are weak. And the weak must be cold. We gotta go.
We escaped the facility with nothing but targets in our way. With the flock vanquished, it was time to kill a guard. I rode back to the place where this madness all started to confront Joseph, all the while having flashbacks to the journey we have been on, seeing more red than a Turkish flag covered in strawberries. Faith's voice whispered in my ear, "You can destroy us but not the bliss." Jacob's vibrant blood-red vision of an impending doom flashed before my eyes. Purge the weak and watch those burn, and finally I arrived at the church. With 2 huge bliss canisters outside, was this really the end, or has my mind been lost and my soul returned? Joseph slowly walked outside and started to rant about how the seals are being opened. He gave our family a choice, the same one his brothers once had: walk away or stand and fight.
The word of God. You made martyrs of my family. And I am prepared to do the same to yours. But God is watching us, and He will judge us on what we choose in this moment. I told you that we were living in a world on the brink, where every slight, every injustice, where every choice reveals our sins. And where have those sins led us? Where have those sins led you? Your friends have been taken and tortured, and it's your fault. Countless people have been killed, and it is your fault. The world is on fire, and it's your fault. Was it worth it? Was it? When are you gonna realize that every problem cannot be solved with a bullet? When you first came here, I gave you the choice to walk away. You chose not to. In the face of God, I'm making you that offer one last time. You put down your guns. You take your friends. You leave me my flock. And you go in peace.
Go in peace. You're fucking insane.
You see? We never should have been here in the first place.
You know what to do, Rook. Remember. God is watching. Every slight, every injustice, and every choice reveals our sin. John was wrong. Your sin is not wrath. So you'd rather watch the world suffer and burn than swallow your pride. And the Lamb broke the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake. And the sun became black, and the moon turned to blood.
Before I could react, he knocked over the bliss canisters and sent me and my friends into a world of intoxication. Like a drinking game with Bill Cosby, we were all dragged into the bliss.
Toto? I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
My mind was lost as I stumbled around the battlefield once more with the sword of Damocles hanging over my throne. I gathered my friends back from the brink and proceeded to shoot Joseph. With a final shot from the group, he turned into a red mist, and just for a brief moment, we gained an incremental amount of sanity back.
Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. And when the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven. And the seven angels before God were given seven trumpets. And there were noises, thunderings, lightnings, and an earthquake.
Joseph Seed, you're under arrest.
And I heard a great voice from the temple say to the angels, "Go your ways, and pour from the vials the wrath of God upon the earth."
The mountain shook in the background as it was time to end this. All of it. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your ability. But with the temptation, he will also provide the way of escape, that you may be able to endure it. The word of God spoke to me in my final moment in Hope County, begging me not to trust what the world shows. I went to arrest Joseph, and just as the cuffs hit his palm, the final seal opened. The ground shook and the gates of hell welcomed in its new followers. It turns out the prepper stashes aren't the only thing Far Cry 5 has in common with Fallout. Welcome to the apocalypse, Mad Max.
Get moving! Drive! Drive! Drive!
We scarpered to safety as the bombs dropped around us, a vision of drugs or reality. We saw this world in fierce vision, and the music still hummed in my head. This isn't real, one deputy said. Just as the noose wasn't real for Hudson and the tranquil lake wasn't real for the marshal, but allow the story to play you, and you'll become the character and not the listener. I arrived back at Dutch's bunker and crashed headfirst into a tree. Like George of the Jungle, everyone was dead except for me and Joseph. He dragged me into the bunker. And lay me on the bed. Standing over me, he foretold the collapse. This is how it ends, with father and child. Welcome to the family, son.
You know what this means? It means the politicians have been silenced. It means the corporations have been erased. It means the world has been cleansed by God's righteous fire. But most of all, it means I was right. The collapse has come. The world as we know it is over. I waited so long. I waited so long for the prophecy that God whispered in my ear to be fulfilled. I prepared my family for this moment. And you took them from me. I should kill you for what you've done. But you're all I have left now. You're my family. And when the world is ready to be born anew, we will step into the light. I am your father. And you are my child. And together we will march to Eden's gate.
With the ending washing over us like a seagull in a storm, I, like many of us, thought the ending was ambiguous and open to interpretation. The multitude of times you hear about the mental conditioning and the power of suggestion led me to believe the full tale was nothing more than a drug-induced hallucination. And seeing as how the ending drew parallels with the classic film Dr. Strangelove, with the war room mentioned in the radio broadcast and the same song used in both the film and the game's credits, I thought it was a nice way of saying no matter the problem, you should just stop caring and just love the bomb. With that said, and with the story over, the people of Hope County in Montana could go back to doing what everyone does after a collapse in society.
Let's just beat him up and take his stuff!
No, do not listen to that man. Remain calm. You will all have a chance to be gouged.
Goodness.
With the tale of our multi-sexual marshal done and dusted, we bid farewell to the idyllic fields of Hope County and said, "Good morning to the sun-kissed skies of Vietnam!" Unlike many of our games on the market today, the extensive amount of studios working under the umbrella of Ubisoft meant that each individual team had full creative freedom to make the Far Cry game they always wanted to, while the main team headed off to Montana. So with a long development time and full creative control, how did the teams do? Hours of Darkness can last anywhere between 12 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock the following morning. This DLC, on the other hand, can be completed 100% in less than 2 hours. This first piece of DLC is brought to us by Ubisoft Shanghai, formerly known for their critically acclaimed Splinter Cell titles Pandora Tomorrow and Double Agent, and their disastrous foreboding title I Am Alive, which went from being a AAA first-person survival game set in Chicago after the events of an earthquake leaves the city lifeless, a feat Ubisoft managed to pull off of Watch Dogs 1, to a third-person Xbox Live indie title being released to capitalise off the popularity of the games at the time, like the Uncharted franchise and Mirror's Edge. Now, without any restraints, the team was let loose on the Junior engine to create their own stories, and their first outing has been written more times than a bad joke on a Christmas cracker. Far Cry Hours of Darkness comes from the lead designer of Army of Two, The Devil's Cartel, and sees you trek through a dark, desolate jungle, invading the Viet Cong and freeing your allies to make it back to the chopper in one piece. The DLC starts off like a love letter to Far Cry 3. You're trapped in a cage and taunted by your adversaries. Before you know it, the bombs are dropped and you start the running trend of every Far Cry title, legging it down a linear path whilst being shot at. It's basically like being a runaway bride at a Texas wedding. There's a huge disconnect with this first outing. The game explicitly tells you to utilise the stealth mechanics, throwing your weapon at enemies, stealth takedowns and stalking your prey from the grass lane as they pass you by, but the game also gives you the ability to decimate internment camps with airstrikes.
That's hot.
The game tries to blend Bad Company and Rambo First Blood together and walks away looking bewildered by the results. The map is built in a very organic way, in which objectives and collectibles are scattered in the direction of your main goal with very little divergence from the main path. Each camp you destroy will grant you an airstrike token, which is also rewarded for playing stealthily. The game quickly becomes the equivalent of an early ringtone, one note and highly repetitive. Making its way over from the base game is a lavish companion system. However, in Hours of Darkness there's a classic spin thrown into the recruitment of these companions, as unlike the main game, once these buddies bite the bullet, they are dead and will not return. Each of the Far Cry expansions were intertwined with the main game to create a level of cohesion between each experience, and in Hours of Darkness that consists of looking through every nook and cranny for downed soldiers so you can take their lighters. Other than that, the game falls into a standard affair, liberating hostages, gathering intel and killing VIPs, and if you do all these tasks properly, then you might just make it out alive. After the darkness dispelled from the developers, Egyptologists got what they wanted on the 15th of June 2018, and all the Egyptian gods celebrated. Hurrah! With a steady stream of free assets and character customization. A large update added Bayek, Anya and all the assets that a Tomb Raider could want from the Assassin's Creed Origins set, making the arcade editor a bit more thorough, with Far Cry 5 mutating into a fitting attempt from Ubisoft to let you know, just like the common cold, you can never escape their games. And then came July the 17th, in which the team over at Ubisoft Shanghai swapped out rice hats for real guns with the Red Faction inspired expansion Far Cry 5 Lost on Mars. While the main game of Far Cry 5 starred Deputy Dog and his forgettable banditos, Lost on Mars puts the tantalising trailblazer Nick Rye in the spotlight for some out-of-this-world shenanigans. After a routine shopping trip goes awry in the back streets of Hope County, Nick finds himself face to face with the franchise's recurring character Herc. After heading out the opening chamber, you are greeted with the core mechanic for this expansion, to climb radio towers and activate local points of interest, which is something new for Ubisoft. Luckily, this design and navigation for these obstacles is more in line with experiences like Breath of the Wild and Saints Row 4, instead of the standard affair that we're used to in Ubisoft games. Each tower comes with a new gameplay mechanic to traverse and obstacle to overcome. Speaking of come, another new mechanic which is incorporated into this DLC is the ability to utilise a 3D printer to create suit upgrades and print more hard-hitting weaponry. The only catch is, as the game puts it, the currency this machine uses is alien ejaculate. Ubisoft products are a lot like premature ejaculation, they always come out too early and are very disappointing at the end. So from then on out, I ended up playing this game a lot like Stormy Daniels, collecting jizz to spur financial gain. If you are easily put off by sex jokes, then this is one piece of entertainment you will be primarily playing muted, as the game is packed to the rim with sexual explicit obscenities, from the alien cum to the shield entitled the cock blocker, and even hunting down your friend's bananas and 2 apples. The dialogue does get to the point that you start to question if the developers were just addicted to porn while they were penning the script. I'm pretty sure the original title for this DLC was Muffs on Mars. Other than the cheesy dialogue that will give Ratatouille a run for its money, this outing does incorporate a new level of strategy to the Far Cry brand, with segments dedicated to the game The Floor is Lava. Stepping on the sand will attract the insectal horde, so it is advised to keep off the ground and use your newly equipped jetpack. Luckily there's enough distractions along your weightless way to sway you from the path now and again. With the main goal being the towers, the game also has a multitude of side content. Killing alien queens because the only good bug is a dead bug is a primal task. Assaulting robot repair stations, finding power cores and playing Operation with Herc's body. Upon landing on Mars, Herc was disemboweled and scattered across the wasteland. Your main objective before leaving the red planet is to find Herc's bods, bits and hands and dick, so you can make him whole again. Fortunately for Herc, the local populace on Mars must deal with these problems on a daily basis, as early on in your adventure you are gifted with your companion for this exploratory mission entitled the Brobot, which is half droid from Killzone Shadowfall and half Dinklebot from Destiny. This little scrapped in America can eviscerate your adversaries with lasers, while you work on evading their attacks, which creates a good synergy between traversal and combat. Unlike Mass Effect Andromeda, the game does have other side missions tucked away for you to find. Clutch Nixon made his way to Mars for some challenging manoeuvres, and Larry has a plethora of notes to obtain. It's not all red rocks and rainbows, however, as the game does have a lot of minor gripes. Kicking them off is the voice of reason in this expansion, a female artificial intelligence unit dubbed Anna, which is a Cortana from Windows 10. She seems to like the word transference in the same way that Ubisoft likes the words iconic, or Parliament likes the words Brexit and accusations. The game can also feel a bit like you're being tortured by Deadpool, with the mass amount of pop culture references spat out by the character's voice in the opening hour alone. It honestly makes the end and battle of Ready Player One look tame in comparison. This is also coupled with the most egregious problem to hit open world games to date: forced linearity. In the first hour of this DLC, starting up the map, you will see lights for side objectives and collectibles to gather, but if you decide to venture off and grab any of this additional content, you will be greeted by a respawning message and a hard cut to black. But luckily that's only in the initial hours. After activating the mine, the game opens up with a large map to explore and interesting missions to partake in, some even more engaging than the base game. The towers also start to create more of an incentivization to pursue later on, with each percentage of the map taken back and unlocking more characters and forces to fight by your side. This is a literal power struggle. The DLC is also packed with callbacks to the base game, and surprisingly a cheeky nod to those who played a cracked version of Crisis Warhead, as your character can obtain an explosive grenade that fires out chickens. It's poetry in motion, and it may seem like a foul play to dismantle your enemies. The callbacks to the base game, on the other hand, are more plentiful. Nick relives the twisted trauma of the Seed family and finds himself taking on both John Seed and the rest of the cult in hallucinogenic sequences. Symbolically, Lost on Mars is the antithesis of player conditioning, completing minimal tasks because an AI instructs you to, and not questioning their motives. If Hours of Darkness was a hitchhike down a dirt road in a desert, then Lost on Mars is a tour group in an urban metropolis, with a few extra dollars thrown at the developers like a drunk guy at a strip club. The team has managed to create something that feels worth the long trip to the doomed planet, and will have players screaming, "I'll see you at the party, Victor!" even though Red Faction got there first. On August the 8th, actor and antagonist Greg Brick announced that his cult classic character The Father would be returning to Far Cry in the future. Which begs the question, why ain't the game on a friggin' nuke if you want to continue this story? Nukes are pretty much the writer's way of saying this is how it ends. Do you think there would be a sequel to Shrek if they dropped a fat man on the bugger?
Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me.
Tactical nuke incoming!
How do you know when your game is dead? When you add zombies to it. Dead Living Zombies is a final piece of content for the season pass holders of Far Cry 5, and it's all made using the little engine that could. Since its inception, the in-game engine has been through quite a few changes, starting out as a plonk down objects and hope for the best scenario, to something that rivals the Forge creation kit found in Halo. Over the course of 6 months, the engine has seen the incorporation of destructible objects, scripting tools, and other properties like Assassin's Creed join in the mix, and a suite of new abilities. And then there's this DLC that may just be the next gen equivalent of Oblivion's horse armor. Dead Living Zombies is like an Instagram model, beautiful to look at online, but shit to be with. So let's start this reanimated corpse and talk about some brain dead shenanigans, and finally find out where my breakdowns end and my comedy begins. If the fish weren't enough in the base game, Far Cry takes on COD by literally creating a horde mode that spans over 7 maps with an incentive to replay them via a score attack mode to gain more points to unlock zombie Pacific costumes. Each scenario is framed as a movie pitched by the eccentric movie mogul Guy Marvel, as he desperately tries to pitch a new IP to Ubisoft. Act 1 is your standard zombie affair, and a situation we have all been in before, getting shotted by a farmer on his land. The objective is simple: run around shooting zombies and destroying mutation stations, or MS for short. The first encounter isn't that entertaining, though it does showcase what the average player could achieve with the in-game engine, akin to how Media Molecule crafts their games by creating a single player out of the engine's tools, and then challenging the player to do better. Other than the showcase at hand here, this first map would have been better off Left 4 Dead. After we leave our old MacDonald had a mutation station, EIEIO, we moved on to the second pitch entitled Burnt Bridges, or as it's formerly known as How People Lost Any Trust in EA Products. This map sees your protagonist shoot down the horde on an elongated bridge to retrieve an ammo supply dump on the other side. Gameplay wise, it's very reminiscent of the bridge level from Left 4 Dead 2, and even has the same sort of route throughout it, which for a PC player playing this on Steam comes across as highly ironic. The gameplay is still your standard cookie cutter affair: shoot the zombies and stop the MS. This escapade ends by making World War Z look more like Shakespeare. Speaking of which, we move on to the one that was most advertised during the promotional art, Undying Love, a Shakespearean take on the classic zombie formula. It's pitched as a pseudo-adaptation of Romeo and Juliet, and just like the map before this one, it's much to do about nothing. Run around a graveyard and kill the zombies which respawn from mutation stations. After that map ends by teasing a werewolf that we don't get the fight, the next map begins with a satirical name that pokes fun of the John Carpenter classics, Escape from the Rooftop, which should be a fun romp. You're playing a Snake Plissken badass from Blood Dragon with an 80s synth orchestra behind you, shooting millions and millions of the undead. It's something that doesn't happen. Instead, the experience expects you to shoot 1 million zombies. Literally, it's brain dead boredom. But if you're having corpse problems, I feel bad for you, son. I have 999 problems, but fun ain't one. After the trials and tribulations, we escape the rooftop via a comic transition and move on to the next one, the final 3 on site, and in third place isn't exactly the best of the worst. Entitled Killer Climate, which sounds like a Neil Breen film but is somehow far worse. You play as a park ranger tasked with shooting Yogi Bears, zombies, wolverines and a blood dragon. And that's it, I'm done.
Jim! Jim! Call 911! Jim! Jim! How could you have done this? Jim! can't believe you committed suicide.
As I recover from the bullets in my brain, I stumble upon the final two. In second place is a riff on Fast and the Furious, and believe me, I'm feeling the latter. So this is a different kind of experience. It's more akin to the Clutch Nixon challenges from the base game, in which your character is tasked with driving a car in a specific time frame to make it from the tranquil beach to the lab in order to cure your infection. And for a change, it's actually enjoyable. The best 28 seconds of your life, said the prostitute to the client. Now we find ourselves at the end of this short-lived venture, and with one more map to close the curtains on. Let's see if we can at least end this on a groovy note. This is probably the most ambitious creation you can expect to create using the in-game engine, and has a few nice twists and turns as you run around a familiar bunker setting while the room fills with blood, slaughtering hordes of the undead in the process. This map is a perfect encapsulation of the tools on display, providing both FX work and real-time transitions, accumulating in your character diving into a very goo you were trying to escape from. Poetic. Out of the 3 pieces of DLC that Season Pass holders received, this one is dying shite. The Mars expansion fleshed out the story and added new enemies and mechanics. The Vietnam one gave us a closer look at minor characters from the base game and allowed us to bomb bases to see a different side to the classic Far Cry formula, but Dead Living Zombies acts as a rip and tear of your aspirations. The DLC saw multiple delays and refigurations over the course of its development and doesn't even hold a candle to some of the talented work that the community has managed to push out over the months, with more coming in the foreseeable future. You have creations of Silent Hill, where players have been given the chance to experience a cancelled project thanks to a dedicated fan, multiplayer escapades of Bioshock Infinite and Mad Max Racing, so whereas this DLC does act as a nice display of the engine's capabilities, it's still a tech demo that costs money. You don't need to be Scooby-Doo to solve this mystery. It's less Planet Terror and more Black Sheep of the Season Pass. In conclusion, Far Cry 5 does encapsulate the crazy world we find ourselves living in today, a world in which we complain about privacy and safe spaces and confidentiality, whilst simultaneously sharing naked pictures of ourselves online. We can't prepare for the future if we live in the past. I feel Far Cry 5 is Ubisoft's outlet to vent their frustration. We all have that one voice to do that. Personally, I have a shit list, but then again I don't have a budget of $130 million to spend and a revenue of $320 million. I feel over time, a lot like its source material, this game may become another cult classic that may not have been seen that way by those who lost faith in Ubisoft. Whether drenched in satire or political symbolism, we can all agree on one thing here. This is America. Thank you for watching. And now to into that regular YouTube thing that you get sick to death of by now. Subscribe if you want me to infest your YouTube page like syphilis. I don't have a Patreon, but if you see me on the street corner, you could just give me some money. Oh wait, that makes me sound like a prostitute. Alright. Let me end this video anyhow with my favourite Bible verse. I can't dance. I can't talk. The only thing about me is the way that I walk. Genesis 1991.